Huh, are you serious? I unintentionally raised my voice to a plea from Bob, my senior from my high school fencing team. I can only ask you. Bob, now kneeling before me, pleads, please, I beg you. I'm Tom, a 32-year-old office worker. Currently, I work at a company run by Bob's father. Incidentally, Bob holds the position of vice president in that company. So, this scene is quite peculiar as it's the vice president begging an ordinary employee. Living with such a young lady, we are a young man and woman. Bob's request is for me to live with his younger sister for a month, a proposition that naturally elicits a what reaction. Moreover, his sister is 22 and I'm 32. It wouldn't be too surprising if something were to happen when a young man and woman live under the same roof. Furthermore, I can't fathom why he'd want to place his sister in such a situation. I swear, I wouldn't dare cross any boundaries, but you never know. There's been some stuff, you know about my dad remarrying, right? Of course, I knew about it. The CEO remarried recently. His previous wife passed away due to illness. The stepdaughter from his new wife seems to be the sister Bob's talking about. You mentioned your younger brother has autism, right? No, he has a developmental disorder. I was surprised that Bob remembered that. I have a younger brother who's 6 years younger than me. He's been diagnosed with a developmental disorder, but to our family, it's just a normal part of life. Being reminded like this feels somewhat strange. I wonder how my brother's condition and living with Bob's sister are connected. My sister has ASD. Bob stated, taking a big gulp from his beer. You can tell he's upset that a new family member has a disability. ASD, autism spectrum disorder, right? It's one of the developmental disorders. ASD, autism spectrum disorder, has distinct traits like difficulty in social interactions or having intense interests. However, it doesn't have the language development delays seen in classic autism. So, it often goes unnoticed until one gets older. Many artists and CEOs have it. It's a bit different from my brother's condition. I don't know how to interact with her. Initially, the plan was for the whole family to live together, but Sarah, oh, that's my sister, Sarah was against it. So, her name is Sarah. She is reluctant to live with her new family, and is still living in the house of her deceased biological father. And it seems that Bob wants me to cohabit with her in that house. It seemed like quite a complicated family situation. I thought maybe you could persuade Sarah. It seems that the company's CEO, my senior colleague's father, is quite upset because Sarah has refused to live with him. Apparently, there's a wedding reception scheduled for next month at his wife's request. He hopes to establish the new family by then. From what I hear, it feels like it's just for the CEO and his family's satisfaction, but there might be feelings I don't understand. True, I might be more accustomed to this than the average person. However, forcing something on your sister will be tough. You know that, right, Bob? People with ASD dislike changes. Moreover, their ability to perceive others' emotions is significantly lacking. Living with others would be nothing but a burden for her. Please help. My dad's been so down. I really want to do something for him. So, almost pushed into it by Bob, I began a temporary cohabitation with his sister, Sarah. There was one thing Bob warned me about. Never flirt with my sister. When I first met Sarah, I was taken aback. She looked like a living doll, with porcelain-like skin and soft, long hair. Her features were so perfect that she looked almost unreal, and I couldn't sense the vitality you'd expect from a living person. I knew it's one of the traits of ASD, but she never made eye contact with me. Living together was going to be quite a challenge. My name is Tom. Nice to meet you. Without trying to force eye contact, I spoke slowly. Then, Sarah gave a slight nod and said, "Nice to meet you." Her voice sounded like a gentle ringing bell. It made me think that everything about her was delicately crafted. And so, our shared life began. Originally, after her parents' divorce, Sarah lived with her biological father. It seems that around the time her real father passed away due to illness, her mother remarried. The sudden change in environment seemed to have caused Sarah a bit of panic, and her new family didn't know how to handle her. I took the first week off from work to adjust to our new living situation. A break to settle into the new life. The house where Sarah lived was an old American-style house. What was different was that there was a studio. Her father had been a sculptor. Having grown up seeing that, I heard Sarah chose the same path. She spent most of her time in the studio. If you talked to her, she would respond properly, and when the gallery owner she had a contract with visited, she handled it well. She wasn't having any problems with daily life. From today, I'll be making dinner. I called out from the entrance of the studio. Sarah, engrossed in her work, didn't turn around. It's proof that she's immersed in her own world. I talk to her, little by little, even if she doesn't respond. I chat about daily stuff, and sometimes I share my memories. The key is not expecting her to relate to my stories. I repeat myself slowly until my voice becomes mere background noise for Sarah. On the 5th day of living together, there was a change in Sarah. When mealtime comes, she sits promptly at the table, waiting for the food I've prepared. Once the dishes are laid out, Sarah rearranges them according to her own rules. I try my best to remember those rules. I create a comfortable space for Sarah. Tastes good. When I ask, Sarah provides a detailed response. She doesn't just say it's delicious. She specifies things like, the seasoning on this ingredient is perfect and wonderful, aiming to convey the exact sense of delicious. I nod in agreement as I listen. This became our routine. Tom, look at this. While I was working remotely in the living room, Sarah, coming out of her studio, called me over. In her hand was a small wooden horse carving. Its smooth curves were unique, making it look rather mystical. It's beautiful, isn't it? This is beautiful, right? It was surprising to see Sarah, who usually struggles with empathy, seeking affirmation from me. Seeing her overcome her challenges made me adore her even more. It's beautiful, truly. Everything you create has this smooth, mystical, beautiful essence. Hearing my thoughts, Sarah nodded with joy. In truth, the first time I saw one of Sarah's sculptures, I was floored by her talent. It made me think, this is what they mean by gifted. The world I see must be entirely different from the one Sarah perceives. Through her works, I witness a world I've never seen before. A delicate and beautiful world, a universe only Sarah inhabits. I wonder if someday I'll become a part of that world, but I shake off that daydream. I'm reminded of a promise with Senior Bob. Though I doubt I'd ever cross that line, I can't help but think about it. Gazing at Sarah's delicate profile, reminiscent of fine glasswork, I let out a small sigh. As she got used to my presence, Sarah began initiating conversations. Why do you stay in this house, Sarah? Is it because of your studio? Didn't they build you a new one in the other house? I heard the CEO, preparing for a remarriage, had an additional studio built for Sarah. Everything's been set up perfectly for her arrival. Sarah furrowed her brow slightly in response to my question. It's the expression she has when she's trying to convey something. Whenever she wants to ensure I understand her precisely, she does that. I wait patiently for her to speak. If I leave this place, I'll forget about my dad, she said, looking down. Sarah isn't ready to embrace a new life. Accepting her father's passing is already challenging, let alone adjusting to her once estranged mother and new stepdad. Change is hard. It's hard for me. The pace at which I experience time feels different from others, making everything chaotic, and I lose my sense of self. The moment Sarah first opened up about her feelings, I felt tears welling up. The one struggling the most with the gap between herself and others is Sarah. She wishes to blend in, but it's not easy. People with ASD often find it challenging to fit into society. they don't necessarily see that as a good thing. They suffer more than we might imagine. Thanks, I got the message. Upon my reply, Sarah smiled with relief. It's often said they have limited facial expressions, but once you get used to them, you can detect even the slightest change. I felt that what Bob's family lacked was the readiness to accept Sarah. We've only got a week left of living together. How's everything going with you guys? During the day, Bob had invited me to lunch, and I had been out and about for the first time in a while. When you get used to working from home, leaving the house becomes a hassle. Moreover, the house where I live with Sarah feels very comfortable to me. When you ask how things are, everything's going well. I didn't quite know how to respond, so I just said something vague. Immediately, Bob scolded, "Don't give me that vague answer. We've known each other for a long time, so he can easily see through me. Sarah is a wonderful young lady. She's just a bit more delicate than others. I get the concept of becoming new family members, but pushing that on her too quickly just won't work." I really wanted to say, "It's your ego talking," but I held back. I do have some social skills, after all. "Do you think Sarah is against this marriage?" Bob asked hesitantly, showing me he was trying to be considerate. Seeing this side of Bob, who's usually bold and forthright, was quite unusual for me. I vaguely remembered he's always been bad with sensitive topics. It's not that she's against it, it's just hard for her to accept right now. I conveyed to Bob what Sarah had shared with me. I explained how important it was for Sarah to spend time in that house, cherishing memories of her real father. "I understand that, but..." Bob made a face as if he'd swallowed a bitter pill. He probably didn't want to see the dejected look on his dad's face. Everyone's pulling each other in different directions with their caring feelings. If someone doesn't give in, they risk tearing the family apart. We should give it more time, I firmly told Bob, who replied, "Got it," without much enthusiasm. That day, the sky had been overcast since morning, giving me an ominous feeling. They say there's a thing like feeling down due to the weather, and I tend to get headaches before it rains. To add to that, there was this tension in my left shoulder, causing me to rotate it multiple times. Eventually, my back started hurting. Oh, this is bad, I realized based on past experiences, but it was too late. I felt a sharp pain in the depth of my left chest and sat down on the spot. Calm down, I murmured to myself while taking deep breaths. I have a congenital heart defect. I've always managed to coexist with this condition, but occasionally a seizure starts. I do have my medication, and as long as I don't panic, I'll be okay. I repeated it in my head like a spell, thinking of my mids, and suddenly realized I'd been careless, as I hadn't had a seizure recently. I left them at my apartment, having started living together with Sarah. I had the pills I take after every meal. Realizing I'd forgotten the meds I take during seizures, I wanted to kick myself for my past carelessness. "Tom, what's wrong?" Perhaps hearing me fall, Sarah, who usually doesn't leave her studio, peeked out from the entrance of the living room. Seeing me, clutching my left chest and groaning, Sarah's face turned pale. She immediately turned on her heel and ran to the studio. I assumed she had fled to the place she felt safest due to the unexpected crisis, but Sarah returned, her face still pale. She held her cell phone in her hand. While looking at me, she seemed to be calling 911. Listening to the instructions from the other end, Sarah reassured me. "It's okay, the ambulance will be here soon." Breaking into a sweat, I tried to give her a reassuring smile. I just hoped to make Sarah feel a little better. In response, Sarah gave me a gentle smile. In that moment, it felt like our hearts truly connected. And then, my memory faded. I woke up in a hospital bed. Oxygen was being administered, and I could hear the familiar beeping of the ECG machine. Trying to move my hand to press the nurse call button, I realized I couldn't. Sarah held my right hand tightly in both of hers. She was bowed down, pressing her forehead to her hands in prayer. She's so beautiful, I thought. Feeling the cold touch of Sarah's fingertips, my affection for her deepened. Sarah, I'm okay now. I wanted to sound more reassuring, but all that came out was a hoarse whisper. Hearing my voice, Sarah looked up with a startled expression. Our eyes met for the first time. In her clear, beautiful eyes, I saw my weakened reflection. Are you really okay? You're sure you're okay? Sarah kept asking. I kept reassuring her, I'm fine, over and over. I kept reassuring Sarah, I'm not in pain anymore and I'm fine, over and over until she was convinced. At some point, Anders entered and scolded us, asking, why didn't you use the call button? Sarah and I shared a brief laugh. Why, you ask? That's something only Sarah and I would understand. I believe by sharing these little secrets, I'll get closer to Sarah. In the end, our living together had to be paused due to my hospitalization. I wanted to get discharged as soon as possible, but I was told some tests were necessary. Every day, Sarah came to visit me in my hospital room. Whenever she was leaving, she'd always ask, when are you coming back? I guess this is when one person finds another true leader. I pondered whether feelings of liking someone stack up like layers in a millefeuille and eventually grow into cherishing, missing, or loving someone. Our life together continued even after I got discharged. Today, I'm meeting up with Sarah and her parents to introduce them. Bob seemed to feel guilty towards me. Did I push you too hard? Did the stress make your seizure worse? Bob apologized to me multiple times with such concerns. Honestly, it made me feel a bit awkward. Seeing Bob's different demeanor, I began to sweat nervously. It's okay. Seizures are unpredictable. Sometimes they happen, sometimes they don't. I took out what I thought was a handkerchief from my pocket to wipe my forehead. But the next moment, I was startled. I genuinely thought my heart would stop. Because I realized that I wasn't holding a handkerchief. If there is a God, I prayed he wouldn't let Bob notice. But it seemed like my prayers went unanswered. Bob was staring at me with wide eyes. In my hand, I held not a handkerchief, but a piece of Sarah's cute underwear. I recalled that right before coming here, I had been helping Sarah with the laundry. It seems I mistakenly put Sarah's underwear in my pocket, thinking it was a freshly washed handkerchief. Such a thing normally wouldn't happen. But here we were, facing this bizarre situation. I swear it wasn't intentional. But would that excuse even matter? Bob, please calm down. This was an accident, a surprising mishap, that's all. I tried to explain, holding up the underwear with the cute ribbon for Bob to see. Just put it away. It's embarrassing. I could feel the piercing stares of the staff from the corner of my eye. I felt like yelling out loud that it was just an accident. You haven't flirted with Sarah, have you? Bob inquired, trying to make sure. I raised my right hand and replied, I swear I haven't laid a finger on her. Of course, I haven't. But I do feel like our hearts are connected. I haven't laid a hand on her, I haven't. I've been sensing some affection from Sarah bit by bit. I hope so. I smiled broadly and replied, it's all good, as Bob, who looked at me with suspicious eyes, glared at me. A few days later, I took Sarah to a fancy restaurant. I'm nervous in this high-end place that I don't usually go to. It feels like a blind date. Today is the day when the new family meets. Somehow, I ended up attending too. Probably to make Sarah feel at ease. The first to show up was Sarah's mom. The CEO, in other words, Sarah's new dad, would be a bit late. Sarah's mom said to Sarah, it's been a while, but Sarah didn't respond. Seeing Sarah's usual attitude, her mom sighed heavily. She apologized to Bob, I'm so sorry. Why apologize when there's no need? It seems like Sarah's mom doesn't really care for Sarah. I have a feeling I'm right. She's nervous, maybe afraid she might say something disrespectful to her mom's new husband. Proving that, she kept complaining to Bob, saying there was no need for such a meeting. Seeing her mom's attitude, I felt a bit disgusted. She could be more supportive of Sarah, but it might be unavoidable. Originally, Sarah's mom left home without Sarah. She probably never imagined Sarah would come back to her. If she thinks Sarah is a nuisance, if she doesn't want her, I'll take her. The moment the CEO appeared, I bowed before him. Please let me marry your daughter. The private room in the restaurant was stunned by my sudden words. Even the hostess who escorted the CEO looked shocked. I'd like to have your permission to date Sarah with the intention of marriage, I said loudly. Bob yelled, I told you not to touch her. That's what I haven't touched her yet. Not until now. I couldn't help but raise my head and shout back. The CEO and Sarah's mom exchanged glances and laughed. You're serious? I nodded vigorously in response to the CEO's question. Sarah feels the same way. I made it clear and turned to Sarah for her agreement. But where Sarah was sitting, she was nowhere to be seen. Where'd she go? Scanning around, I noticed she had somehow made her way to the garden, gazing at the carp in the pond. Tom, they're beautiful. Catching my gaze, Sarah's eyes sparkled as she said that. I mean, we're discussing something more important here. I scratched my head and sat down next to her in the garden. 3 big carp were leisurely swimming around. Oh, you're right. They're lovely, Sarah. Sarah smiled brightly at my reply. In the end, the family gathering turned into a meet and greet between me and Sarah's parents, and I was bombarded with questions until I was exhausted. I want to wear a traditional white wedding gown, Sarah suddenly said, leaning in close to my face. Just picturing Sarah in a white gown made my heart race. She'd no doubt be the most beautiful bride in the world. 6 months later, I was lucky enough to marry a bride as beautiful as an angel. Bob told me I stole his family, but well, that's a separate matter. Bob will just have to find a new family on his own. Bob, you should hurry up and find someone to marry to. Bob chuckled and said, mind your own business. Now, Bob frequently visits us, becoming like a brother-in-law. Life's full of unexpected blessings, and that's what makes it enjoyable.